Two bodies, face down in the snow. Leather jackets. Hell's Angels patches crusted with ice. Margaret Caldwell dropped to her knees. The bigger one wasn't breathing. The other had bones showing through his jeans. She was 76 years old. Alone, no phone, no help coming. The smart thing was to walk away. Let someone else find them. Let someone else deal with the consequences. Instead, she grabbed the bigger man's collar with both hands and started dragging. 250 pounds of dead weight, 400 yards of frozen hell. Her town would never forgive her for what she was about to do. She did it anyway. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments and stay until the end. This story will change how you see strangers forever. 400 yards to the cottage. Maggie's boots punched through the snow crust with every step. 250 pounds of dead weight dragged behind her on a rusted metal sheet she'd ripped from a collapsed fence. Her shoulders screamed, her lungs burned. She kept pulling. Behind her, the second man crawled. His shattered leg left a red trail in the white snow. He hadn't said a word, hadn't cried out, just kept moving inch by inch through the frozen hell. Tough. This one was tough. Name, Maggie barked without turning. Marcus. Got a nickname, Marcus? Poet. She almost laughed. A Hell's Angel called Poet. Earn it. Taught English Lit. 10th grade. That stopped where she turned, really looked at him for the first time. Mid-30s, sharp eyes despite the pain. Something broken behind them that had nothing to do with his leg. What happened? My daughter, 2 words. She understood everything. How old? 16, drunk driver, 4 years ago. Maggie nodded once, turned back, started pulling again. My son was 34, she said. Motorcycle accident, 6 years back. I found him on a road just like this one. 10 minutes too late. Poet was quiet. Then I'm sorry. So am I. Every damn day. The big man woke up fighting. 1 second, he was unconscious on the metal sheet. The next, his hand was around Maggie's throat, squeezing hard enough to make stars explode behind her eyes. She didn't panic. She'd had worse. Da Nang, 1968. A soldier with half his face gone, convinced she was the enemy. She talked him down while his fingers crushed her windpipe. This wasn't Da Nang, but muscle memory didn't care. You want to kill me? She said calmly. Go ahead. But then you freeze to death in the next 20 minutes and your friend dies right beside you. That what you want? His grip loosened. Not much, but enough. Who the hell are you? The woman saving your life. Now let go of my throat so I can finish the job. 5 seconds. 10. His hand dropped. Poet, he rasped. Where's Poet? Right here, brother. Marcus dragged himself close enough to touch the big man's arm. She's good crusher. Let her work. Crusher. The name fit. Everything about him was oversized hands, shoulders, the rage barely contained behind his eyes. Maggie rubbed her throat. She'd have bruises tomorrow. Worth it. 200 yards left, she said. Think you can walk? Can't feel my legs. That's the hypothermia. It'll pass or it won't. Either way, we're moving. She grabbed the sheet and pulled. The cottage door crashed open. Maggie half-carried, half-dragged Crusher through the entrance, dumping him onto the sofa near the fireplace. He groaned. Good. Groaning meant alive. Poet was harder. His leg needed stabilizing before she could move him. Every shift sent visible waves of agony across his face. Sweat poured down his forehead despite the cold. This is going to hurt, she warned. Already hurts. Going to hurt worse. She grabbed his ankle with one hand, his knee with the other. On 3. 1, she pulled. Poet's scream bounced off the stone walls. His whole body convulsed. His hands clawed at the floor hard enough to tear splinters from the wood. But he didn't pass out. Tough as nails. Done, Maggie said. You're done. Breathe. He breathed, ragged, shuddering, but controlled. You didn't say 3, he gasped. Never do. Anticipation makes it worse. She splinted the leg with boards from Walter's workshop. Not pretty, functional. It would hold until the hospital, if they ever made it to the hospital. You're a nurse, Crusher's voice came from the sofa. His eyes tracked her as she worked suspicious calculating. Combat medic, Vietnam, 2 years. That why you helped us? I helped you because you were dying. We're Hell's Angels. I noticed the patches. People don't help Hell's Angels. Maggie looked up from wrapping Poet's leg. Son, I've stitched gut wounds on 18-year-old boys while mortar shells blew holes in the tent above my head. You think a couple leather jackets scare me? Silence. Then Crusher did something unexpected. He laughed, short, painful, but real. Lady, you're either crazy or the bravest woman I've ever met. Both. Now shut up and drink this. She handed him a mug of broth, hot, strong, the kind that brought men back from the edge. He drank. Sam, your husband. Poet's voice was stronger now. The fire had done its work, color returning to his cheeks, tremors fading from his hands. Maggie glanced at him. What about him? The pictures. He nodded toward the mantel. He looks like a man who built things. Blacksmith. 52 years we were married. He built this cottage with his own hands. Every stone, every beam. Where is he now? Cemetery on the ridge. 3 years this spring. I'm sorry. Don't be. We had 52 good years, more than most people get, more than I deserved. She stood, crossed to the window where Walter's iron cross caught the morning light. He made this a week before he died. Said he wanted me to have something to hold on to. That's beautiful. That's Walter. Everything he touched, he made better. Crusher's voice cut in from the sofa. Why are you telling us this? Maggie turned. Because you asked. Because you're in my home. Because in about 30 minutes, this whole situation is going to get very complicated, and I want you to understand something before it does. What? I don't save people because they deserve it. I save people because that's who I am. Walter taught me that. This cross reminds me. So whatever happens next, whatever your club does, whatever the sheriff does, whatever this town does, I need you to know I don't regret pulling you off that road. Not for 1 second. The phone rang. Maggie knew who it was before she answered. Margaret Caldwell, have you completely lost your mind? Helen Price, right on schedule. Good morning, Helen. Don't you good morning me. I just drove past your road. I saw the motorcycles. I saw the blood. And now Mary Patterson is telling me she saw you dragging someone through the snow at 6 this morning. 2 someones. What? I dragged 2 someones. One was unconscious. The other had a broken leg. Dead silence. Then who? Hell's Angels, Montana chapter. They crashed on the black ice last night. The sound Helen made wasn't quite a scream, more like a strangled gasp. They're in your house. Right now, Margaret. They're injured, Helen, severely. One has hypothermia and a head wound. The other has a compound fracture. They need medical attention. Then call an ambulance. Nearest ambulance is 45 minutes out. They would have died. Then let them die. The words hung in the air. Maggie could hear Helen's breathing on the other end. Fast, panicked. You don't mean that, Maggie said quietly. I don't. Margaret, these people are dangerous. Everyone knows what they do. The drugs, the guns, everyone knows what they've heard. Nobody knows these specific men. That doesn't matter. They're Hell's Angels. So was my nephew. Silence. Why? What? Robert, my sister's boy. He patched into a club in California when he was 23. Spent 15 years riding. You know what he does now? He's a paramedic in Sacramento. Saved over 200 lives last count. That's different. Is it? Helen didn't have an answer. I'm calling the sheriff, she finally said. I expected you would. This isn't right, Maggie. Maybe not. But it's happening. Click. Sharing. You've got about 20 minutes. Maggie set down the phone and turned to face the 2 men. Crusher was already struggling to sit up. We need to leave. You can barely stand. Don't matter. If the cops come, the cops are coming whether you leave or not. The question is whether you're here to tell your side of the story or whether you're bleeding out in a ditch somewhere because you tried to run on a leg that won't hold you. Poet's voice was calm. She's right, Crusher. We're not going anywhere. You don't understand. The club will understand that we crashed, almost died, and some old lady saved our lives. That's not betrayal, that's luck. Maggie raised an eyebrow. Old lady. Apologies, ma'am. Extremely capable woman of advanced years. Despite everything, she smiled. Why Crusher? He looked up from his broth. What? Your name. Why Crusher? A shadow crossed his face. You don't want to know. I'm asking. Long pause. The fire crackled. Outside, a crow called. Because I break things, he finally said. Bones, faces, whatever needs breaking. That's what I do, what I'm good at. That's what you were good at, past tense. What makes you think anything's changed? You had your hand around my throat 20 minutes ago. You could have killed me. You didn't. You were helping us. So, he stared at her, confused, like she was speaking a language he didn't understand. So, you don't hurt people who help you. That's called a code, son. That's called having lines you won't cross. That's the beginning of being something other than what you've been. Sirens. Distant but closing fast. Poet struggled to sit up straighter. Here we go. Maggie smoothed her sweater, checked her hair in the window reflection. Whatever happens, she said, let me do the talking. The sheriff knows me, known me for 30 years. If anyone can smooth this over, it's me. Crusher snorted. Lady, nothing smooths this over. We're Hell's Angels. That's all they're going to see. Then maybe it's time someone showed them something different. She walked to the door, paused, turned back. I never asked, either of you. Do you want me to help you? Really help you? Not just patch your wounds and send you on your way, but actually help you find something better than what you've got? Poet answered first. Ma'am, I don't even know what that would look like. Neither do I, but I'm willing to figure it out if you are. Crusher said nothing, but he didn't say no. The first cruiser appeared through the trees, then a second, then a third. Sheriff Roy Dawkins stepped out of the lead car, hand resting on his holster. Behind him, 4 deputies fanned out in a tactical formation. They were ready for war. Maggie stepped onto the porch. Morning, Roy. He stopped short. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't a 76-year-old woman in a hand-knit cardigan calmly sipping coffee. Maggie, got a report of Hell's Angels at your residence. That's correct. Are you under duress? Do I look like I'm under duress? He didn't answer. His eyes scanned the cottage windows looking for threats. There are 2 men inside, Maggie continued, both injured, 1 head wound, 1 broken leg. They crashed on the black ice last night. I brought them here because they would have died otherwise. And you didn't think to call us. I was busy saving their lives. Paperwork could wait. Dawkins' jaw tightened. Maggie, these are Hell's Angels. You understand what that means. I understand they're human beings who needed help. They're criminals. Do you have warrants for their arrest? Pause. Not specifically for these individuals. Then they're not criminals. They're citizens who were in an accident and are currently receiving medical treatment, which last time I checked isn't illegal in Montana. The deputies exchanged glances. This wasn't going the way they'd expected. Dawkins took a step forward. I need to see them, verify their condition. You can come inside, alone. Your boys stay on the porch. Maggie, my house, my rules. You want a warrant, go get one. Otherwise, this is how it works. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Dawkins nodded to his deputies. Stay put. He followed Maggie inside. Crusher was standing when they entered. Standing, despite the hypothermia, despite the head wound. He'd pulled himself upright through sheer force of will, and he stood facing the door like a man ready for whatever came through it. Dawkins' hand went back to his holster. Easy, Maggie said. Everyone easy. Ma'am, Crusher's voice was rough. Maybe you should step aside. I'm not stepping anywhere. Sheriff, this is Jack Brennan and Marcus Delgado. They're my patients. They're going to be staying here until they're well enough to travel. Dawkins looked from Crusher to Poet to Maggie. You've got to be kidding me. Do I look like I'm kidding? These men nearly died last night, on my road, 50 feet from my property. If I hadn't found them, you'd be scraping frozen corpses off the asphalt instead of standing in my living room asking stupid questions. Dawkins flinched. In 30 years, he'd never heard Maggie Caldwell raise her voice. She wasn't raising it now. That was the terrifying part. Every word was calm, measured, absolute. I served this community for 52 years, she continued. I delivered half the babies in this town. I set bone-stitched wounds and held dying men's hands when their families couldn't reach them in time. I have earned the right to decide who stays under my roof. Maggie. And if you have a problem with that Roy Dawkins, you can explain to your mother why you arrested the woman who sat with her through 3 days of pneumonia when the hospital was full. Dead silence. Dawkins' face went through several colors. Finally, I'm going to need to take statements. Fine, after they've rested, after they have eaten, after I'm satisfied they won't keel over during your interrogation. That's not protocol. I don't give a damn about protocol. I give a damn about keeping people alive. That's been my job for 60 years and I'm not stopping now. She opened the door. You can come back tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Bring coffee. I'll have them ready to talk. Dawkins stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, short, surprised. Maggie Caldwell, hell of a woman. You're just figuring that out. He shook his head, walked to the door, paused. Just so you know, the club is going to come looking for them. When they do, this whole situation gets a lot more complicated. I know. And you're still doing this. Maggie looked at Crusher, at Poet, at the Iron Cross catching the afternoon light. Roy, my husband used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when it's easy. It's what they do when it's hard. She met his eyes. This is hard, and I'm doing it anyway. The sheriff's cruisers disappeared down the mountain road, but Maggie knew this was just the beginning. She stood at the window watching until the last flash of red and blue faded through the trees, then turned back to face her two unexpected guests. Crusher had collapsed back onto the sofa the moment Dawkins left. The effort of standing had cost him more than he'd let show. His face was gray sweat beading on his forehead, despite the fire's warmth. You're an idiot, Maggie said. Excuse me? Standing up like that, with hypothermia, with a head wound, you could have passed out and cracked your skull open on my floor. Had to show him I wasn't weak. There's a difference between strength and stupidity. You almost died 12 hours ago. Nobody expected you to be doing jumping jacks. Poet laughed from his spot on the floor. Short, pained, but real. She's got you there, brother. Crusher glared at him. Then unexpectedly his mouth twitched. Shut up, Poet. Both of you shut up, Maggie said, and eat something. I didn't drag you 400 yards through the snow just to watch you starve. She disappeared into the kitchen. Crusher waited until she was gone, then leaned toward Poet. We need to contact the club. I know. If they find out what happened from someone else, I know Crusher. Wolf is going to lose his mind. Poet closed his eyes. Yeah, he is. William Wolf Hartley, president of the Montana chapter. The man who'd taken both of them in when they had nothing. The man who'd given them purpose, family, identity. The man who trusted no one outside the club. Ever. Maybe she's got a phone we can use, Crusher said. And telling him what that we crashed, almost froze to death, and some random old lady is playing nurse. You know how that sounds? Better than him hearing it from the cops. Poet opened his eyes, stared at the ceiling. You're right, we need to call. Maggie returned with 2 bowls of soup and a look that said she'd heard everything. The phone's in the kitchen. You can use it after you eat. Crusher started to protest. After you eat. He ate. The soup was good, thick, homemade. The kind of food Crusher hadn't tasted since he was 12 years old and his mother was still alive. He tried not to think about that. Your husband, he said between spoonfuls. The blacksmith. He'd teach you to cook like this. Other way around. Walter could build anything with his hands, but he'd burn water if you let him near a stove. Sounds like my dad, Poet said quietly. Maggie looked at him. Your father was a cook, a chef, had his own restaurant in Billings for 20 years. Delgado's, best Mexican food in Montana. Had heart attack 8 years ago, 6 months before my daughter. He didn't finish. Maggie sat down in Walter's old chair. So you lost them both, your father and your daughter, within a year of each other. 6 months apart. My wife left somewhere in between, said she couldn't watch me destroy myself. And the club found me, or I found them. I don't remember which. I just remember being so angry I wanted the whole world to burn, and they gave me a place to put that anger. Did it help? Poet was quiet for a long moment. No, but it kept me alive long enough to figure out that I didn't actually want to die. I just didn't know how to live anymore. Maggie nodded slowly. My son Tommy was the same way. After he came back from Iraq, 2 tours, saw things no 23-year-old should see. He came home with all that rage and nowhere to put it. The motorcycle club gave him brothers, gave him purpose. What happened? He rode too fast on a night he should have stayed home. Hit a patch of gravel on Highway 12. By the time I got there, she stopped, breathed. I was a combat medic for 2 years. I've seen men die in ways that would give you nightmares for the rest of your life. But nothing prepared me for finding my own son on the side of the road. Crusher set down his bowl. Ma'am, I don't know why you helped us. I don't know why you're still helping us, but I want you to know something. What? If I'd been in your position, if I'd found 2 strangers on the road bleeding and dying, I don't know if I would have stopped. Why not? Because the world taught me not to. Because every time I trusted someone, they hurt me. Because the only people who ever gave a damn about me were my brothers in the club. He met her eyes. You're the first person in 20 years who proved that wrong. The phone rang. Maggie crossed to the kitchen to answer it. Her voice drifted back, tense and clipped. Yes, Helen, I'm aware of what I'm doing. No, I don't need you to come over. No, I don't need the pastor. What I need is for people to mind their own. Pause. He said, what longer pause? I see. Well, you can tell Mayor Whitmore that if he wants to discuss this, he can come up here himself instead of hiding behind you. I'm not some scared old woman who's going to back down because a politician makes noise. She hung up. When she returned to the living room, her face was stone. What? Crusher asked. The mayor called an emergency town meeting. Apparently having Hell's Angels in Ridgecrest is a public safety crisis that requires immediate community action. Poet swore under his breath. How bad? They're talking about calling in state police, maybe FBI. For what we crashed on some ice, that's not a federal crime. No, but your club has a reputation, and reputations matter more than facts in places like this. Crusher struggled to his feet. I need that phone now. Maggie didn't argue. She led him to the kitchen, handed him the receiver, and stepped back to give him space. Crusher dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang twice. Yeah. Wolf, it's Crusher. Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that made Crusher's stomach drop. You've been off-grid for 18 hours, Poet too. We've had people looking for you since midnight. We crashed. Black ice on the mountain road outside Ridgecrest. Poet's got a broken leg. I've got a concussion. Where are you now? A cabin. Some woman found us. She's a nurse. She patched us up. Some woman. Her name's Margaret Caldwell. She's 76 years old. She dragged me 400 yards through the snow by herself because I was unconscious. More silence. Is she with the cop? No, she's not with anyone. She just helped us. Nobody just helps us, Crusher. This one did. Crusher could hear Wolf breathing on the other end, calculating, planning. The cops know you're there. Sheriff came by this morning. She sent him away. Sent him away. Told him to come back tomorrow. Told him we were her patient and she'd decide when we were ready to talk. For the first time, something shifted in Wolf's voice. Something that might have been curiosity. This woman, she stood up to a sheriff for 2 Hell's Angels she'd never met. Yeah. Why, I don't know. She says it's because she's a nurse, because she served in Vietnam, because her husband would have done the same thing. Her husband's there too. Dead 3 years. So she's alone. She's alone. Wolf went quiet again. We're coming to get you. Me and 8 others. We'll be there by tomorrow night. Crusher's grip tightened on the phone. Wolf, listen to me. This woman put herself on the line for us. If the club shows up in force, it's going to look like we're taking over the town. The cops will escalate. People will get hurt. People who hurt my brothers get hurt worse. Nobody hurt us. We crashed. It was an accident. And the sheriff, the mayor, the town that wants to call in the feds. They're scared, that's all. They don't know us. They don't need to know us. They need to fear us. Crusher closed his eyes. This was the moment. The line he'd walked for 15 years. Loyalty to the club versus something he couldn't quite name. Wolf, I'm asking you, come yourself. Come with 1 or 2 guys. Meet this woman. See what's really happening here before you decide to burn it all down. You're asking me to trust a stranger. I'm asking you to trust me. The silence stretched so long, Crusher thought the line had gone dead. Then, 48 hours, I'll come myself, with 2 others. We'll see what's what. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If I don't like what I find, this town's going to remember the name Hell's Angels for the rest of their lives. Click. Crusher hung up the phone. His hands were shaking. Maggie was watching from the doorway. He's coming. 48 hours, 3 riders, including the president. And if he doesn't like what he sees... Crusher didn't answer. He didn't have to. Maggie nodded slowly. Then we've got 48 hours to change his mind. The rest of the day passed in a strange kind of limbo. Maggie tended to her patients, changing Poet's bandages, checking Crusher's pupils for signs of worsening concussion, forcing both of them to drink more fluids than they thought humanly possible. But underneath the routine tension coiled like a spring. Every car that passed on the road made Crusher's head snap toward the window. Every creak of the old cottage made Poet reach for a weapon that wasn't there. You two need to relax, Maggie finally said. You're burning calories you don't have. Hard to relax when half the town wants us arrested and the other half wants us dead, Poet replied. Nobody wants you dead. You sure about that? Before Maggie could answer, another car appeared through the trees. This one didn't pass by. It turned onto her property. Crusher was on his feet in an instant. Easy, Maggie said. I know that car. The vehicle stopped. The door opened, and Pastor James Holloway stepped out, Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. Oh, wonderful, Poet muttered. The God Squad. Hush! Maggie walked to the door and opened it before Holloway could knock. Pastor, what brings you up the mountain? Holloway was 62, silver-haired, with the kind of gentle face that inspired trust in his congregation. Right now, that face was creased with worry. Margaret, I came because people are talking. People are always talking, James. That's not news. They're saying you've got Hell's Angels in your house, that you're harboring criminals, that James, he stopped. Look at me. He looked. Do I seem like a woman who's lost her mind? No, you seem like the same Margaret Caldwell I've known for 30 years. Then trust that. Trust that I know what I'm doing. Trust that I haven't suddenly decided to become a criminal mastermind at 76 years old. It's not about trust, Margaret. It's about safety. These men nearly died last night. One of them used to be a teacher. The other spent his childhood in foster care, getting passed around like an unwanted package. They're not monsters, James. They're human beings who made hard choices because life didn't give them better options. Holloway shifted uncomfortably. Even so, the reputation of these organizations. Do you know what my reputation was in Vietnam, Pastor? He blinked. What? I was the nurse who wouldn't give up. The one who kept working on soldiers everyone else had written off. I saved men that the doctors said were hopeless. You know how I did it? How I by refusing to see them as statistics, by treating every single one of them as someone's son, someone's father, someone's brother. She gestured toward the cottage. Those 2 men in there, they're someone's sons too. And I'm not going to let them die physically or spiritually just because their leather jackets make people uncomfortable. Holloway was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, can I come in? Meet them? Maggie stepped aside. The pastor entered the cottage like he was walking into a lion's den. His eyes went immediately to Crusher, the biggest threat, and then to Poet lying on the floor with his splinted leg. Gentlemen, I'm Pastor Holloway. I serve the church in town. Crusher said nothing, just watched. Poet surprisingly spoke first. Nice to meet you, Pastor. I'm Marcus. This is Jack. Those your real names, real enough. Holloway moved closer, sat down in a chair across from Poet. Margaret says you used to be a teacher. That's right, 10th grade English, Billings. What happened? Life happened, death happened. I made choices I'm not proud of. Are you proud of who you are now? The question hung in the air. Poet thought about it, really thought. No, he finally said, I'm not, but I'm still breathing, and some days that's enough. Holloway nodded slowly. You know I've been a pastor for 35 years. I've counseled murderers, addicts, Men who did things that would give you nightmares. And you know what I've learned? What? That nobody is beyond redemption. Not one single person. The only question is whether they're willing to reach for it. Crusher spoke for the first time. And if they're not, Holloway turned to face him, then they stay in hell, the one they built for themselves. Something flickered in Crusher's eyes. You don't know anything about my hell, preacher. No, I don't, but I know it exists. I can see it in your eyes. What do you see? Pain, rage, and underneath all of it, fear. You're terrified that the wall you have built to protect yourself is the same wall that's keeping you trapped. Crusher stood up so fast the chair behind him crashed to the floor. I'm not afraid of anything. I didn't say you were afraid of anything external. I said you were afraid of yourself, of who you might become if you let someone actually see you. The room went dead silent. Maggie didn't move. Poet held his breath. For one terrible moment, it looked like Crusher was going to put his fist through the pastor's face. Then slowly his shoulders dropped. Get out. Jack, I said get out. Holloway stood, moved toward the door, paused. Mrs. Caldwell has my number. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be there. He left. The cottage felt smaller after he was gone. Crusher stood by the window, his back to the room, his whole body rigid. He had no right, he said, no right to say those things. Poet's voice was quiet. He wasn't wrong, though, was he? Crusher spun around. Don't. I've known you for 8 years, brother. 8 years. And in all that time, you've never once talked about your childhood. Never once told me what happened in those foster homes. Never once, because it doesn't matter. It matters. It made you who you are. And who is that poet, a thug, a criminal? A man who's broken so many bones he's lost count. A man who's still alive. A man who found a family when the world gave him nothing. A man who, when I was at my absolute lowest, sat with me through 3 nights straight because he was afraid I'd eat my gun. Crusher's jaw clenched. That was different. Was it you saw something in May worth saving? Why can't you see it in yourself? Maggie stepped forward. That's enough, both of you. They looked at her. Whatever happened in your past, both of you, it's done, it's over. What matters now is what happens next. And what happens next is that you survive the next 48 hours. You convince Wolf that this town isn't a threat, and you figure out whether you want to keep being the men you've been or become something different. Something different, Crusher repeated. What would that even look like? Maggie picked up Walter's iron cross from the windowsill. My husband spent 50 years as a blacksmith. You know what that means? It means he spent 50 years taking raw metal, ugly, shapeless, worthless, and turning it into something beautiful, something useful, something that would last for generations. She held up the cross. He made this a week before he died, told me it was his final piece, said he wanted me to have something to hold on to when he was gone. It's beautiful. It started as a pile of scrap iron. You know how he transformed it, how time, fire, pressure, and time, over and over again, heating and hammering and cooling and heating again, until all the impurities burned away and only the true metal remained. She looked at Crusher. You think you're worthless. You think you're beyond saving, but you're wrong. You're just not finished yet. The fire's still doing its work. That night, Maggie made up beds for both men. Crusher took the sofa. Poet stayed on the floor near the fire, his leg propped on cushions. Neither of them slept. Around midnight, Poet's voice broke the silence. Crusher. Yeah, what the pastor said about being afraid of yourself. What about it? I've been there. After Emily died, after Sarah left, I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the man looking back. I was so full of rage I thought I was going to explode. How'd you survive? The club, the road, the feeling of going fast enough that everything else disappeared. Poet paused, and one night about 6 months in, Wolf found me sitting in my trailer with a gun in my hand. Crusher sat up. He didn't say anything, didn't try to talk me out of it. He just sat down across from me and said, if you're gonna do it, do it. But first tell me one thing worth staying for. What did you say? I couldn't think of anything, not one thing. And that scared me more than dying did. So what happened? Wolf took the gun out of my hand, put it in his pocket, and said, "When you find that thing, you let me know. Until then, you are riding with me." Crusher was quiet for a long moment. "He saved your life. He gave me time to save myself. There's a difference, Viagdin." Somewhere outside, an owl called. The fire crackled. "I was 6, Crusher said. Poet waited. "When my mom died, I was 6 years old. Cancer took her in 3 months. My dad was already gone left before I was born. So I went into the system." Christ. First foster home lasted 2 weeks. The husband was a drunk, used to hit me when his team lost. Second home was better, but they got pregnant with their own kid and didn't want me anymore. Third home, he stopped. "You don't have to." Third home, the father used to lock me in a closet when I cried. Said I needed to learn to be a man. I was 7 years old and I spent 3 months sleeping on a closet floor because I missed my mother. My poet said nothing. There was nothing to say. 23 placements. That's my number. 23 different homes before I aged out at 18. And you know what all of them had in common? What? Not one of them wanted me. Not one. I was a paycheck, a burden, a problem to be managed until somebody else's turn. The first time in my life anyone ever looked at me like I mattered was when I patched into the club. Wolf. Wolf saw something in me. I still don't know what, but he gave me a name, a purpose, brothers who would die for me. For the first time in my life, I belonged somewhere. And now, Crusher stared at the ceiling. Now some 76-year-old woman dragged me through the snow and called me son like she meant it. Now some preachers telling me I'm scared of myself. Now everything I thought I knew about the world is getting turned inside out. That's called growth, brother. That's called terrifying. The fire popped. Sparks flew up the chimney. Crusher. Yeah. Whatever happens in the next 48 hours, whatever Wolf decides, whatever the town does, I want you to know something. What? You're not worthless. You never were. The system failed you. The world failed you. But you didn't fail. You survived. And survival is worth something. For a long moment, Crusher didn't respond. Then so quietly, Poet almost missed it. Thanks, brother. The morning came cold and gray. Maggie was up before dawn as always. She found both men awake, Crusher standing at the window, Poet struggling to sit upright. "Coffee's on," she said, "and we've got company coming." Crusher tensed. "Who?" Helen called. "The mayor's on his way up with Sheriff Dawkins. Apparently last night's town meeting didn't go well." "How not well?" "Let's just say you two are the most exciting thing to happen to Ridgecrest since the sawmill burned down in '89. Poet laughed despite himself. "What's the plan?" "The plan is we tell the truth. We answer their questions. And we pray that 48 hours is enough time to show them you're not the monsters they think you are." The cars arrived an hour later. 2 sedans, Sheriff Dawkins in the first, Mayor David Whitmore in the second, along with a man in a suit that Maggie didn't recognize. "State police," Crusher muttered. "They called in state police." "Stay calm, Mahoma," Maggie said. "Let me handle this." She walked onto the porch before they reached the door. "Gentlemen, I assume you're not here for the coffee." Mayor Whitmore stepped forward. He was 58, well-fed, with the kind of polished appearance that came from 3 decades of small-town politics. "Mrs. Caldwell, I think you know why we're here. I think you're here to tell me what to do in my own home, and I think you're going to be disappointed. This isn't about your home. It's about public safety. There's no threat to public safety. There are 2 injured men recovering from a near-fatal accident. That's all." The man in the suit stepped forward. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm Detective Morrison with the Montana State Police. We've received reports of Hell's Angels gang members taking refuge in this residence." "They're not taking refuge. They're receiving medical treatment. Be that as it may, we have an obligation to investigate. Investigate what, a motorcycle accident? Since when does that require state intervention?" Morrison's jaw tightened. The Hells Angels are a known criminal organization with documented involvement in drug trafficking, weapons violations, and violent crime across multiple states. And these specific men, what are their crimes? That's what we're here to determine. Well, you're welcome to check. You'll find that Jack Brennan has 2 prior arrests, one for assault charges dropped and one for public intoxication. Marcus Delgado has a clean record. Not even a parking ticket. Some crime wave you've got there, detective. Whitmore's face reddened. Margaret, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You're the ones who drove up here with sirens blazing like you're raiding a drug cartel. These men crashed their motorcycles. They nearly froze to death. I brought them inside and treated their injuries. That's the whole story. Then you won't mind if we come inside and speak with them? Maggie looked at the detective, at the mayor, at the sheriff, who at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. Fine, come in, but you treat them with respect or you leave. My house, my rules. They entered. Crusher was standing by the fireplace. Poet was seated in a chair, his leg propped up, his expression unreadable. Morrison looked them over like they were specimens in a lab. Jack Brennan, Marcus Delgado, I'm Detective Morrison. I need to ask you some questions about your activities in the area. Crusher glanced at Maggie. She nodded. Ask, he said. What were you doing on that road last night? Riding back from Billings. We'd been visiting Poet's father's grave. Anniversary of his death. Morrison wrote something in his notebook. You're a long way from your home chapter. We have permission to travel. Check with Wolf William Hartley. He'll confirm. We've already tried to contact Mr. Hartley. He's not returning calls. Then wait, he's coming here himself. Should arrive tomorrow. Morrison's pen stopped. William Hartley is coming here, the chapter president. That's what I said. Morrison and Whitmore exchanged looks. Mrs. Caldwell, the mayor said carefully, you do understand what this means if the Hells Angels president is coming to Ridgecrest. I understand that a man is coming to check on two of his people who nearly died. That's called loyalty, Mayor. You might want to look it up. This isn't about loyalty. This is about a known criminal leader entering our community. Then arrest him when he breaks a law. Until then, he's a citizen with the same rights as anyone else. The room went silent. Detective Morrison closed his notebook. Mrs. Caldwell, I'm going to be direct with you. If anything happens in this town, anything at all, while these men are in your custody, you will be held personally responsible. Maggie met his eyes without flinching. Detective, I survived 2 years in a combat zone. I've delivered babies' amputated limbs and held dying men in my arms. I've buried a husband and a son. You don't scare me. She walked to the door and opened it. Now get out of my house and tell the rest of this town that if they want to talk to me, they can do it one at a time like civilized people. I'm done with firing squads. They left. When the cars disappeared down the mountain, Crusher let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Lady, you've got more guts than anyone I've ever met. Maggie picked up the coffee pot. I've got common sense. There's a difference right there. They're going to make your life hell. Let them try. She poured 3 cups. Now, we've got about 36 hours before Wolf arrives. I suggest we use that time wisely. Poet looked up. What did you have in mind? Maggie handed him a cup. I've been thinking about what you said, about your father's restaurant, and what Crusher said about never having a home. And she sat down in Walter's chair. And I think maybe it's time you stopped running from your past and started running towards something else. Like what? Maggie smiled. Like the future, if you're brave enough to reach for it. 36 hours passed faster than any of them expected. Maggie spent the time doing what she did best, healing. She changed Poet's bandages twice, monitored Crusher's concussion symptoms, and forced both men to eat more than they'd consumed in the previous week combined. But it was the conversations that mattered most. Late into the second night, Poet told her about Emily, his daughter. The way she used to read Shakespeare aloud just to hear the words. The college applications she'd been filling out the week before the drunk driver crossed the center line. She wanted to be a teacher, he said. Like Mipadami said she wanted to show kids that books could change their lives. She sounds remarkable. She was the best thing I ever did, the only thing I got right. Maggie reached over and squeezed his hand. You're still here, Marcus. That means you've still got time to get more things right. Crusher was harder to reach. He spent most of his time by the window watching the road waiting for Wolf. But sometime around midnight on the second day, he sat down across from Maggie and asked a question she wasn't expecting. Did you ever think about giving up after your son died? Maggie set down her coffee. Every day for the first year, I'd wake up and think, what's the point? Walter was still alive then, but I could barely look at him. Every time I saw his face, I saw Tommy. Every time I heard him laugh, I remembered what we'd lost. How'd you get through it? I didn't get through it. I went around it, under it, sometimes straight into it. Grief isn't something you survive once, and then it's over. It's something you learn to carry. That sounds exhausting. It is, but the alternative is worse. What's the alternative? Letting it crush you, letting it turn you into someone your son wouldn't recognize. Crusher stared at the floor. I don't know who I am without the club, without the rage. It's been part of me for so long, I don't remember what came before. Then maybe it's time to find out. Before he could respond, the sound of engines broke the morning silence. Not one engine, multiple. Crusher was on his feet instantly. They're here. Maggie walked to the window. 3 motorcycles were coming up the mountain road, riding in formation. The lead bike was bigger than the others, its rider broad-shouldered and steady. That's Wolf, Crusher said. I figured. Ma'am, I need you to understand something. Wolf isn't like me. He doesn't trust anyone outside the club. Ever. If he thinks you're a threat, then we'll show him I'm not. Come on. She walked to the front door, opened it, stepped onto the porch. The motorcycles pulled into her yard and stopped. The engines died one by one, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the sound had been. Wolf dismounted first. He was 52 years old with silver streaking through his black hair and a beard that reached his chest. His eyes were cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who'd seen everything and trusted nothing. The 2 riders behind him stayed on their bikes, watching, waiting. Wolf walked toward the cottage. His boots crunched on the frozen ground. 10 feet away, he stopped. You're Margaret Caldwell. I am. You saved 2 of my men. I did. Why? Same question. Everyone asked the same question. Because they needed saving. Because I could. Because that's who I am. Wolf studied her for a long moment. His eyes moved to the cottage behind her, to the windows where Crusher and Poet were visible, to the iron cross hanging in the window. Your husband made that cross. Not a question. Yes, Walter was a blacksmith. I knew a blacksmith once, a man named Henry Dawes. He made the first knife I ever carried. Told me that iron had to go through fire to become strong. Walter used to say the same thing. Something shifted in Wolf's expression. Not softening, he wasn't capable of that, but a kind of recognition. I've come a long way, Mrs. Caldwell. I've left my chapter in the hands of men I trust because 2 of my brothers needed me. You understand what that means? I think so. It means that whatever happens here, whatever you've done, whatever you intend, it matters to me, personally. He took another step forward. Now, I'm going to go inside and see my men, and then you and I are going to have a conversation about what comes next. Maggie stepped aside. The coffee's hot. Help yourself. Wolf walked past her into the cottage. The 2 riders stayed outside, silent as statues. Inside, Crusher stood at attention like a soldier reporting to a commanding officer. Poet tried to rise, but his leg wouldn't allow it. Sit, Wolf commanded. Both of you. They sat. Wolf circled the room slowly, taking in the photographs, the handmade furniture, the medical supplies organized on the counter. Report, Crusher spoke first. Black ice on the mountain road. We went down around midnight. Poet's leg is broken compound fracture. I took a hit to the head. Hypothermia was setting in when she found us. She dragged you here. 400 yards, through the snow, by herself. Wolf's eyes moved to Maggie, who had followed him inside. You're 76 years old. 76 and change. And you dragged a 250-pound man through 400 yards of snow. I've done harder things. I don't doubt it. He sat down in Walter's chair without asking. His presence filled the room in a way that made the air feel thinner. The town wants you gone, he said to Crusher. The sheriff's been calling. The mayor's been calling. The state police showed up yesterday. We know. And you're still here. She wouldn't let us leave. Wolf turned to Maggie. You kept them here against their will. I kept them here because they would have died if they'd tried to leave. Poet can't walk. Crusher had a concussion. If they'd gotten on their bikes, they would have killed themselves within 5 miles. That's their choice to make. Not while they're in my house. In my house, I decide who's healthy enough to leave. That's the deal. For the first time, something like amusement flickered across Wolf's face. You've got spine, Mrs. Caldwell. I'll give you that. I've got common sense. There's a difference. Most people would have called the cops and walked away. I'm not most people. Wolf leaned back in the chair. His eyes never left hers. Tell me about your son. The question hit like a punch to the chest. Maggie's composure cracked for just a moment before she rebuilt it. His name was Tommy. He died 6 years ago, motorcycle accident. He was in a club, a small one, local, nothing like yours. But you don't blame the club for what happened. I blame the gravel on Highway 12. I blame the speed he was going. I blame myself for not calling him that night, for not convincing him to stay home. She paused. I don't blame the brotherhood he found. That was the best thing in his life after he came back from Iraq. Wolf nodded slowly. My mother left me when I was 6, just walked out one morning and never came back. I spent 12 years in foster care, same as Crusher. Different homes, same story. Nobody wanted us. Nobody gave a damn whether we lived or died. He looked at Crusher. That's why I started the club. Not for the money, not for the power, because I wanted to build a family that wouldn't leave, a family that would die for each other. And now, Maggie asked, now we're the most feared organization in Montana. People cross the street when they see us coming. Parents warn their children about us. Law enforcement has task forces dedicated to destroying us. Is that what you wanted? Wolf was silent for a moment. No, it's not. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Then why do you keep doing it? Because I don't know how to do anything else. Because the world decided who we were before we had a chance to decide for ourselves. Because once you're the villain, nobody gives you permission to be anything else. Maggie stood up, walked to the window where Walter's iron cross caught the morning light. My husband used to say that the fire doesn't destroy the metal. It reveals what the metal was meant to become. She picked up the cross, held it out to Wolf. You've been in the fire your whole life, both of you, all of you. The question is, what are you meant to become? Wolf looked at the cross, at Maggie, at his men. Before he could answer, one of the riders burst through the door. Wolf, we've got a problem. Wolf was on his feet instantly. What? Radio chatter, there's a school bus stranded on Miller's Pass. 15 kids. The storm knocked out the road. Emergency services can't reach them. How far? 20 miles north. But the highway's closed. No one can get through. Maggie's blood ran cold. Miller's Pass, in this weather. You know the area. I know that if those children are stuck up there, they'll freeze before help arrives. The temperature's dropping 10 degrees every hour. Wolf turned to Crusher. Can you ride? I can ride for you. Poet. Not a chance, but don't let that stop you. Wolf looked at Maggie. You said we've been in the fire our whole lives, that we need to decide what we're meant to become. I did. Then maybe it's time we started building instead of destroying. He strode toward the door. We're going to get those kids, all of us, every bike. If emergency services can't reach them, we will. The rider who delivered the news stared at him. Wolf, the road's impassable, even for us. Then we'll make it passable. Those are children, Rico. 15 children who are going to die if someone doesn't do something. And right now, we're the only ones who can. He turned back to Maggie. You've got medical training. I could use your help. I'm 76 years old. And you dragged a 250-pound man through 400 yards of snow. Are you coming or not? Maggie looked at Poet, at Crusher. Stay here, she said. Keep the fire going. If we bring those children back, they're going to need warmth. Poet grabbed her arm as she passed. Be careful. Careful is overrated. She followed Wolf out the door. The ride to Miller's Pass was the most terrifying experience of Maggie's life. She rode on the back of Wolf's bike, her arms wrapped around his waist, her face pressed against his leather jacket to shield herself from the wind. The cold was brutal. The road was treacherous. Twice the bike nearly went down on patches of ice. But Wolf never wavered. The other two riders flanked them, Rico on the left, a younger man called Hammer on the right. They moved in formation, their engines roaring against the silence of the frozen mountains. 20 miles felt like 200, By the time they reached Miller's Pass, Maggie's hands had gone numb and her lungs burned with every breath. But nothing prepared her for what she saw. The school bus was tilted at a 45-degree angle, its rear wheels hanging over the edge of a ravine. Snow had piled up around it, half burying the yellow metal. And inside, barely visible through the frost-covered windows, were the faces of 15 children. Dear God, Maggie breathed. Wolf was already off his bike. Rico, Hammer, assess the bus, find out how stable it is. I need to know if we can get those kids out without the whole thing going over. They moved. Maggie followed Wolf toward the bus. A woman's face appeared in the driver's window, young, terrified, tears frozen on her cheeks. Help us, please. The bus slid off the road, and I don't know how to... We're here, Wolf called up to her. We're going to get you out. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. I'm the driver. There are 15 children and 2 teachers. One of the teachers is hurt. She hit her head when we crashed. Is she conscious? Barely. Wolf turned to Maggie. You're up. I need to get inside. Then we get you inside. The bus door was jammed. Rico tried forcing it, but the impact had bent the frame. Back window, Hammer called. It's cracked. I can break it. Do it. Glass shattered. Cold air rushed in. Children screamed. It's okay, Maggie shouted. We're here to help. I'm a nurse. I'm coming in. She climbed through the broken window with help from Rico, cutting her hand on a jagged edge but ignoring the pain. Inside, the bus was chaos. Children were crying, huddled together for warmth. 2 teachers, Sarah at the wheel, and an older woman slumped in the first row, were trying to keep everyone calm. The older woman was bleeding from a gash on her forehead, concussion at minimum. What's your name? Maggie asked, kneeling beside her. Patricia Hayes. I'm the music teacher. Patricia, I need you to follow my finger with your eyes. Can you do that? She could, barely. Her pupils were uneven, a sign of head trauma. We're going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay still. Understood? Patricia nodded weakly. Maggie turned to the children. 15 faces. The youngest looked about 6, the oldest maybe 12. Listen to me, all of you. My name is Mrs. Caldwell. I'm a nurse. Those men outside are going to help us, but I need you to be brave. Can you do that? A little girl in the front row, pigtails, missing front teeth, raised her hand. Are they bad guys? They look like bad guys. Maggie smiled. They look scary because they ride motorcycles and wear leather. But they came all the way up this mountain in a snowstorm to save you. Does that sound like something bad guys would do? The girl thought about it. No. Then let's trust them, okay? Okay. Wolf appeared at the back window. Bus is stable for now, but the snow's shifting. We've got maybe 30 minutes before the ground gives way. Then we move fast. They formed a human chain. Rico stood at the back window catching children as they were passed out. Hammer positioned himself on the ground, carrying each child to safety and wrapping them in emergency blankets from the biker's saddlebags. Wolf climbed inside to help Maggie. The teacher first, Maggie said. She's got a head injury. I don't want to move her, but we don't have a choice. Together they lifted Patricia. Wolf bore most of the weight, his massive arms cradling the injured woman like she weighed nothing. They passed her through the window to Rico. 14 kids left, Wolf said. Let's go. One by one, they evacuated the children. The little girl with pigtails went first. She wrapped her arms around Rico's neck and didn't let go until he'd set her down in the snow and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. A boy of about 10 refused to leave without his younger brother. I'm not going without Jake. He's scared. Then take Jake's hand and go together, Maggie said. Brothers stick together. They went. Twins, identical girls with matching pink coats, held hands and jumped into Wolf's arms at the same time, giggling, despite the terror. You're strong, one of them said. You're brave, Wolf replied. That's stronger. The last child was the hardest. A boy, maybe 7. He'd wedged himself under a seat and refused to come out. I can't, he sobbed. I can't. Maggie knelt down. The bus creaked ominously beneath her. What's your name, sweetheart? Tyler. Tyler, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I need you to be brave for just one more minute. Can you do that? I want my mom. I know you do. And she wants you. She's waiting for you right now, praying that you're safe. The only way to get to her is to come with me. Can you do that for your mom? Tyler's sobs quieted. Slowly, painfully slowly, he crawled out from under the seat. Maggie scooped him up and handed him to Wolf, who passed him through the window just as the bus lurched. Go, Wolf shouted. Everyone go! He grabbed Maggie's arm and pulled her toward the window. She dove through headfirst, landing hard in the snow as the bus groaned, shifted, and slid another 3 feet toward the ravine. They scrambled backward, putting distance between themselves and the failing vehicle. For a moment, everyone held their breath. The bus stopped, balanced on the edge. Held. Close, Rico muttered. Too close, Wolf agreed. The children were huddled together, wrapped in blankets, shivering but alive. Patricia was conscious, being tended by Sarah. The 2 teachers looked at Wolf and his men with expressions Maggie had never expected to see. Gratitude. You saved them, Sarah whispered. You saved all of them. Wolf shook his head. We just did what needed to be done. The little girl with pigtails tugged on his jacket. Mister, are you a hero? Wolf knelt down to her level. No, sweetheart. I'm just a guy with a motorcycle. But you saved us. Yeah, I guess I did. Then you're a hero. She threw her arms around his neck. Thank you. Something cracked in Wolf's expression, something old and buried and carefully protected. He hugged her back. You're welcome, kid. The ride back to Ridgecrest took twice as long as the ride up. Each bike carried 2 children, the smallest ones sandwiched between the riders for warmth. Sarah and Patricia rode with Rico and Hammer, the injured teacher, strapped securely between them. Maggie rode with Wolf again, this time with Tyler tucked between them, his small body pressed against her chest. You okay back there? Wolf called over the wind. I'm 76 years old and I just climbed through a bus window. I'm fantastic. He laughed. She'd never heard him laugh before. It changed his whole face. They reached Ridgecrest as the sun was setting. The town had turned out. Word had spread, somehow impossibly word had spread, that the Hells Angels had gone to rescue the stranded school bus. Parents lined the streets, searching for their children. The sheriff's cruisers were there, but Dawkins wasn't reaching for his gun. He was directing traffic. As the motorcycles rolled into town, the crowd parted. And then the cheering started. Parents rushed forward, grabbing their children, sobbing with relief. Mothers threw their arms around bikers they would have crossed the street to avoid yesterday. Fathers shook hands with men they'd called criminals. Tyler's mother found him in Maggie's arms and collapsed to her knees, clutching her son like she'd never let go. Thank you, she gasped. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The little girl with pigtails, Maggie learned her name was Emma, had to be pried away from Wolf's side. Her father, a burly man in a flannel shirt, stood before the Hells Angels president with tears streaming down his face. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me, thank her. Wolf pointed at Maggie. She's the one who climbed into that bus. She's the one who got your daughter to trust us. The man turned to Maggie. Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but I'm just a nurse. That's all I've ever been. Mayor Whitmore pushed through the crowd. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. He stopped in front of Wolf and seemed to struggle for words. I don't understand. You could have left. You could have let them die. Why? Why did we help? Wolf cut him off. Because that's what you do when children are in danger. You help. You don't ask questions. You don't calculate risks. You help. He stepped closer to the mayor. We're not the monsters you think we are. We're men who made hard choices because the world didn't give us better options. But we're also men who protect the weak, who stand up when others won't. Maybe it's time you saw that. The crowd was silent. Then Sheriff Dawkins stepped forward. I was wrong about you, about all of you, and I'm sorry. He extended his hand. Wolf looked at it for a long moment. Then he took it. The crowd erupted. Maggie watched from the edge of the celebration, Walter's iron cross tucked safely in her pocket. Wolf found her there a few minutes later. Hell of a day, Mrs. Caldwell. Hell of a day. He stood beside her, looking out at the town that had feared him just hours ago. You asked me what we were meant to become, what the fire was supposed to reveal. I did. I think maybe I'm starting to figure it out. Maggie smiled. That's all any of us can do. Figure it out one day at a time. Wolf reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A patch. Hell's Angels colors, but different. A skull with wings surrounded by words Maggie couldn't quite read in the fading light. This is our symbol, our identity, everything we are. What about it? I think maybe it's time to add something new, a reminder of what we're supposed to be protecting. He pressed the patch into her hand, and I think maybe you should be the one to design it. Maggie looked down at the worn leather in her palm, at the symbol that had terrified a town just 48 hours ago. I'm a nurse wolf, not an artist. You're more than that. You're the woman who reminded us what we could be. The celebration continued around them. Children laughed. Parents wept with joy. Bikers who'd been called criminals stood among neighbors who'd once locked their doors at the sound of engines. Something had changed, something that could never be unchanged. And Maggie Caldwell stood at the center of it all, holding a symbol of fear and wondering if it could become a symbol of hope. The celebration lasted until midnight. Someone had opened the community center. Someone else had brought food casseroles and pews and thermoses of hot coffee that appeared from nowhere and everywhere. The 15 children sat wrapped in blankets, surrounded by parents who couldn't stop touching them, couldn't stop crying, couldn't stop looking at the Hell's Angels like they'd never seen them before. Because they hadn't, not really. Maggie stood near the back of the room, watching it all unfold. Her hands still hurt from the cut she'd gotten climbing through the bus window. Her bones ached from the cold and the ride and the sheer exhaustion of being 76 years old and doing things that would have tired her at 40, but she couldn't stop smiling. Wolf found her there, a cup of coffee in each hand. You look like hell, Mrs. Caldwell. I feel like hell, but it's a good kind of hell. He handed her a cup. The kids are asking for you, especially the little one, Emma. The girl with the pigtails. She wants to know if you'll come say goodnight before her dad takes her home. Maggie's eyes burned. She blamed the exhaustion. Of course I will. She found Emma in her father's arms, half asleep but fighting it with everything she had. The moment she saw Maggie, her face lit up. Mrs. Caldwell, you came. I told you I would, didn't I? You saved us, you and the motorcycle men. We all saved each other, sweetheart. That's how it works. Emma reached out and grabbed Maggie's hand with her small fingers. Will you come visit me at my house? I want to show you my drawings. I would love that. Promise, Maggie squeezed her hand. Promise, Emma's father, his name was Ben. Maggie had learned, shifted his daughter to one arm and extended his free hand. Ma'am, I don't have words. I really don't. When I heard the bus was stuck, when I thought, his voice cracked. You gave me back my daughter. I'll never forget that. Never. Don't thank me. Thank those men. I already did, but they keep pointing at you. Maggie glanced across the room where Wolf stood with Rico and Hammer, surrounded by grateful parents. As if sensing her gaze, Wolf looked up. Their eyes met. He nodded once. She nodded back. That was enough. The crowd began to thin around 1 a.m. Parents took their children home. The casserole dishes were emptied and collected. The coffee ran out, but the Hell's Angels didn't leave. They sat in a corner of the community center, Wolf, Rico, Hammer, and Crusher, who had limped down from Maggie's cottage the moment he'd heard what happened. Poet had wanted to come too, but his leg wouldn't allow it. Maggie joined them. You should be resting, Wolf said. I'll rest when I'm dead. Right now I want to talk. About what? About what happens next. Wolf leaned back in his chair. The exhaustion showed in his face now. Lines that hadn't been there yesterday, shadows under his eyes that spoke of more than one sleepless night. What do you think should happen next? I think you have a choice. You can leave tomorrow, go back to your chapter, and pretend this never happened. Or you can stay. See what this town becomes when fear isn't driving it. And if we stay, what then? Then we figure it out together, one day at a time. Rico spoke up. He was younger than Maggie had realized, mid-20s, with a scar across his jawline and eyes that had seen too much. Mrs. Caldwell, with all due respect, you don't know what you're asking. We're Hell's Angels. We can't just what help people protect communities, save children. Maggie shook her head. You did all of that today. Every single one of you. Don't tell me you can't do it again. It's not that simple. It never is. But simple isn't the same as impossible. Hammer, the quietest of the group, cleared his throat. My old man was in a club, different chapter, different time. He used to tell me stories about the early days before everything got complicated. He said the original idea was brotherhood, protection, standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. What happened to him, Maggie asked. Prison, 20 years. He died inside. I'm sorry. Don't be, he made his choices. But sometimes I wonder, Hammer trailed argued off, wonder what he would have become if someone had given him a different option. A way to use what he was good at for something besides breaking the law. Wolf was silent through all of this. His eyes moved from face to face, calculating, weighing. Finally, he spoke. Mrs. Caldwell, I've been running this chapter for 15 years. In that time, I've buried 12 brothers, 12 men who died because of choices I made, choices the club made. Sometimes I lie awake at night, and I can see their faces, and I wonder if any of it was worth it. Was it? I used to think so. I used to think that loyalty was worth dying for, that the brotherhood was worth any price. And now I'm not sure anymore. Now I'm standing in a community center at 1 a.m, surrounded by people who should hate me, and all I can think about is a little girl in pigtails who called me a hero. His voice cracked. I've been called a lot of things in my life, Mrs. Caldwell. Hero was never one of them. Maggie reached across the table and placed her hand on his. Maybe it's time to change that. The night stretched on. One by one, the others drifted away. Rico to check on the bike's Hammer to find food, Crusher to the bathroom to splash water on his face and pretend he hadn't been crying. Only Wolf remained. Can I ask you something personal? He said. You can ask, I might not answer. Your husband, Walter, what was he like? Maggie closed her eyes. Even after 3 years, the question still hit like a physical blow. He was the best man I ever knew. Patient, kind, strong in all the ways that mattered. She opened her eyes. He could be stubborn as a mule when he wanted to be, but that stubbornness came from conviction. He believed in doing the right thing even when the right thing was hard. How did he handle it? The hard parts. One day at a time, one choice at a time. He used to say that character wasn't built in grand gestures, it was built in small decisions. The decision to tell the truth when lying would be easier. The decision to help a stranger when walking away would be simpler. The decision to stay when everyone else had left. Wolf nodded slowly. I wish I'd met him. He would have liked you. You think so? I know so. Walter had a gift for seeing past the surface. He would have looked at you and seen what I see. What's that? A man who's been hurt so many times he built walls to protect himself. A man who's done terrible things because he didn't know another way. But also a man who's capable of incredible good if he's willing to believe it. Wolf's jaw tightened. And if he's not willing to believe it, then he keeps living in the prison he built for himself. And he dies there alone wondering what might have been. The words hung in the air. Wolf stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the empty street where his motorcycle sat waiting. I've never told anyone this, he said. Not Crusher, not Poet, not any of my brothers. Maggie waited. When I was 8 years old, I watched my foster father beat my foster mother to death. He was drunk, she'd burned dinner. He just kept hitting her over and over, and I hid in the closet and didn't do anything. His voice was flat, distant, like he was describing something that had happened to someone else. Afterward, he came and found me, opened the closet door and looked at me with her blood still on his hands. You know what he said? What? He said, see what happens when people don't do what they're told. Don't ever forget this. And then he closed the door and left me there. I stayed in that closet for 2 days. 2 days with the smell of her blood seeping under the door. When they finally found me, I couldn't speak. Didn't speak for 6 months. Maggie's heart broke. Wolf, that's why I started the club. Not really for brotherhood, not really for family. I started it because I swore I would never hide in a closet again. I swore I would become the kind of man that no one could hurt, the kind of man that everyone else hid from. He turned to face her. But the thing is, Mrs. Caldwell, the thing I've never been able to admit is that I'm still that 8-year-old boy, still hiding, still afraid. I just built a bigger closet. Maggie stood, crossed to where he stood, put her hand on his arm. William, look at me. He looked. What you did today, riding into that storm, saving those children, standing in front of this town and showing them who you really are, that wasn't hiding. That was the opposite of hiding. That was stepping into the light. It doesn't change what I've done. The people I've hurt. No, it doesn't. Nothing erases the past. But the past isn't who you are. The past is what happened to you. Who you are is what you choose to do next. Wolf's eyes were wet. I don't know how to be anything else. Then let me help you figure it out. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. I help people heal. Even people like me. Especially people like you. The next morning, Maggie woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices in her kitchen. She pulled on her robe and walked out to find Wolf, Crusher, and Poet gathered around her table. Wolf was cooking eggs. Crusher was attempting to slice bread and mostly failing. Poet was directing both of them from his chair, his splinted leg propped on a stool. I'm dreaming, Maggie said. I have to be dreaming. Morning, ma'am, Crusher said. Wolf decided we're making you breakfast. Why, bye? Because you look after everyone else. Someone should look after you. She didn't know what to say, so she sat down and let them serve her. The eggs were slightly burned. The toast was cut in irregular chunks. The coffee was stronger than anything she'd ever tasted. It was the best breakfast she'd had in years. I want to ask you something, Crusher said halfway through the meal. Go ahead. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on his plate. Can you teach me to read? The room went silent. Poet set down his fork. Wolf stopped chewing. What? Maggie asked. I can't read. Crusher's voice was barely above a whisper. Not really. I know some words, the important ones, but I can't read a book or a newspaper or... He swallowed hard. I've been faking it for 20 years, pretending, making excuses. But after everything that's happened, after you and the kids and all of it, I don't want to fake it anymore. Maggie reached across the table and lifted his chin, forcing him to look at her. Jack Brennan, look at me. He looked. It takes more courage to admit that than to fight 100 men. And yes, I will teach you. It would be my honor. Crusher's eyes glistened. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm a tough teacher. Ask Tommy. She stopped, swallowed. Ask anyone who's ever learned from me. I don't accept excuses. I don't want excuses. I want to learn. Then you'll learn. The phone rang. Maggie answered it. Mrs. Caldwell. This is Sheriff Dawkins. Good morning, Roy. I'm calling because we've had a request, actually several requests, from the parents of the children you rescued yesterday. What kind of request? They want to throw a parade. Maggie laughed out loud. A parade. For the Hells Angels. They want to honor them publicly. The mayor's already on board. He's calling it a community reconciliation event. I'm sure he is. A week ago, he wanted them arrested. A week ago, they hadn't saved 15 children. Things change, Mrs. Caldwell, sometimes faster than we expect. She looked at Wolf, who was watching her with raised eyebrows. Tell them we'll think about it. They're planning it for Saturday, with or without you. Then I guess we better show up. She hung up. Parade, Wolf asked. Parade. He shook his head. The Hells Angels in a parade. My brothers back home are never going to believe this. Your brothers are welcome to come see for themselves. Wolf was quiet for a moment. You know that's not a bad idea. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time to spread the word. Show the other chapters what we've started here. What's possible when we stop being what everyone expects and start being what we could be. Poet spoke up. Wolf, that's a big step. You're talking about changing the whole culture of the club. I'm talking about giving us a future, a real future. Not just surviving from day to day, waiting for the next raid, the next arrest, the next funeral. Wolf's voice grew stronger. Look at what happened yesterday. Look at what's happening right now. We saved lives. We earned respect. We showed this town that we're more than our reputation. And if the other chapters don't agree, then they don't agree. But I'm not going to let fear stop me from trying. He looked at Maggie. You said my husband believed in doing the right thing even when it was hard. Is this hard enough? It's hard enough. Then I'm doing it. Saturday came faster than anyone expected. The town of Ridgecrest had transformed. Banners hung from streetlights. Tables lined the main street loaded with food and drinks. The high school band was practicing in the parking lot, and someone had constructed a makeshift stage near the town hall. Maggie stood on her front porch watching the motorcycles arrive. Not 3 this time, not 4, 27. Hell's Angels from 6 different chapters riding in formation down the mountain road. They'd come from as far as Oregon and Wyoming, summoned by Wolf's calls over the past 3 days. "What is this?" she breathed. Wolf pulled up beside her porch and cut his engine. "This is the beginning. I told my brothers what happened here. Some of them didn't believe it, so I invited them to see for themselves. And they all came. They're curious, and they trust me." He paused. "I told them about you too, about what you did, what you said." "What did you tell them?" "That you're the woman who changed everything, that you showed us who we could be." Maggie's throat tightened. "I didn't do anything special." "You did, and now they want to meet you." The parade began at noon. Maggie rode in a place of honor in a vintage car that had belonged to the mayor's father, surrounded by children who threw flowers and parents who waved and shouted thanks. Behind her, the Hell's Angels rode in perfect formation, their engines rumbling like thunder, their leather jackets gleaming in the winter sun. The same jackets that had terrified this town a week ago. The same men who had been called criminals, monsters, threats to public safety. Now they were heroes. Emma ran alongside the car, her pigtails bouncing, screaming Maggie's name until her father scooped her up and put her on his shoulders. Mrs. Caldwell, I drew you a picture." "Show me later, sweetheart. It's you and the motorcycle men. You're all wearing capes." Maggie laughed so hard she cried. At the end of the route, the parade gathered near the stage. Mayor Whitmore climbed up first, his face a mixture of political calculation and genuine emotion. "Citizens of Ridgecrest," he began, "a week ago I stood before you and warned of danger. I spoke of threats and risks and the need for protection. I was wrong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I was wrong because I judged these men by their appearance, by their reputation, by the stories I'd heard rather than the actions I witnessed. And when our children were in danger, when 15 of our sons and daughters were trapped on that mountain, facing death, it wasn't the state police who saved them. It wasn't the federal authorities. It was the Hell's Angels." He turned to Wolf. "Mr. Hartley, on behalf of this town, on behalf of every parent here today, I offer you our deepest gratitude and our sincere apology." Wolf climbed onto the stage. The crowd fell silent. "I'm not going to pretend we're saints," he said. "We're not. We've done things I'm not proud of, made choices that hurt people. But I'll tell you what we've never done. We've never turned our backs on someone who needed help. And we never will." He looked out at the sea of faces. 3 days ago, a woman I'd never met saved 2 of my brothers. She dragged them through the snow. She treated their wounds. She stood up to the sheriff and the mayor and the state police because she believed everyone deserves compassion. Everyone deserves a second chance. He gestured to Maggie. "I want you all to meet that woman. Margaret Caldwell, the bravest person I've ever known." The crowd erupted. Maggie didn't want to go on stage. She hated attention. She hated speeches. She hated being the center of anything. But Wolf's hand was on her elbow, guiding her up the steps, and the children were chanting her name, and she didn't have a choice. She stood before the microphone, looked out at Ridgecrest. "I'm not brave," she said quietly. "I'm just old. When you've lived as long as I have, you learn that fear is a waste of time. You learn that the things we're most afraid of, strangers' differences, the unknown, are usually the things we understand the least." She found Wolf's eyes in the crowd. "A week ago, I found 2 men dying on the side of the road. I didn't think about their jackets or their reputation or what people would say. I thought about my son, about the people who might have saved him if they'd been there in time, and I made a choice." Her voice grew stronger. "That choice led to this moment, to this town, to 27 men who rode hundreds of miles because they wanted to see if change was possible." She paused. "Well, I'm here to tell you it is. Change is always possible. All it takes is one person willing to reach out, one person willing to see past the surface to the human being underneath." She held up Walter's iron cross. "My husband made this. He was a blacksmith. He spent his whole life taking raw metal and turning it into something beautiful. He used to say that fire doesn't destroy, it reveals. It burns away the impurities and shows what was always there. She looked at Wolf, at Crusher, at Poet, at the 27 Hells Angels standing at attention before her. These men have been through fire, more fire than most of us can imagine, and today, standing here, I can see what the fire revealed. She smiled. Heroes. The crowd roared. Children ran to embrace the bikers. Parents shook hands that had once clenched weapons. The mayor was crying. The sheriff was laughing. Pastor Holloway was leading the church choir in an impromptu hymn. And in the middle of it all, Wolf pulled Maggie aside. You meant that what you said up there, every word. Even the part about us being heroes. Especially that part. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a patch. New, freshly made. It showed the Hells Angels' skull and wings, but with something added, an iron cross just like Walter's at the center. I had this made last night. Sent the design to our guy in Billings. This is what we're going to be now. This is what you helped us become. Maggie took the patch, traced the iron cross with her finger. It's beautiful. It's you, your symbol, your legacy. Wolf took a breath. Mrs. Caldwell, I need to ask you something. Something important. What? The club wants to change, not just here, everywhere. We want to become the organization we should have been from the beginning, but we don't know how. We don't know where to start. He met her eyes. Will you teach us? Maggie looked at the patch in her hand, at the town celebrating around her, at the children who now saw protectors instead of threats. Yes, she said, I will. 1 month later, the cottage had changed. Not physically, the stone walls and iron weather vane and handmade furniture were the same, but the feeling was different. Warmer, fuller, more alive than it had been since Walter's death. Maggie sat at the kitchen table, a children's reading primer open before her. Across from her, Crusher Jack traced the words with his finger, sounding them out one syllable at a time. The cat sat on the mat. Good, again. He read it again, faster this time, more confident. You're improving, Maggie said. I've got a good teacher. The door opened. Wolf walked in, but not the Wolf of a month ago. No leather jacket, no patches, just a plain flannel shirt and jeans like any other man in Ridgecrest. Morning, Uti said. Morning, coffee's on. He poured himself the cup and sat down beside Crusher. How's the reading, sir? Getting there, she's relentless. That's because I have high standards. Wolf smiled. He did that more often than Neil smiled, laughed, let his guard down in ways that would have been unthinkable a month ago. I got word from the Oregon chapter, he said. They want to try the Ridgecrest model, community service, emergency response, partnering with local law enforcement. That's wonderful. It's spreading faster than I expected. Other chapters are reaching out, asking questions, wanting to know how we did it. Poet limped in from the back room. His leg was healing slowly, but he'd regained enough mobility to move around without crutches. Did I hear Oregon and Wyoming and Northern California? 3 chapters in a month. That's remarkable. That's Mrs. Caldwell. Maggie shook her head. That's all of us. That's what happens when people work together instead of against each other. Hey, the phone rang. I'll get it. Poet crossed to the kitchen and answered. Caldwell residence. Yes, she's here. Hold on, Ann. He held out the receiver. It's the governor's office. Maggie blinked. The what? The governor of Montana. They want to talk to you about some kind of award. Wolf laughed. An award? For the woman who told the mayor to go to hell? I told him to mind his own business. There's a difference. She took the phone. 20 minutes later, she hung up. Well, they want to give me a community service medal at the state capitol in 2 weeks. That's amazing. They want you there too. All of you, the whole club. Wolf's expression shifted. Something old and guarded flickered across his face. In the capitol, that's a lot of exposure. That's a lot of opportunity to show the whole state what we've built here. Crusher stood up from his reading lesson. I think we should do it. You do awesome. A month ago, I couldn't imagine standing in front of anyone. I was ashamed of who I was, of what I couldn't do, but Mrs. Caldwell taught me that shame only has power if you let it. He looked at Wolf. Let's stop letting it. Poet nodded. He's right. We've spent our whole lives hiding from the law, from society, from ourselves. Maybe it's time to stand in the light and let people see who we really are. Wolf was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Maggie. You started this. What do you think? Maggie thought about Walter, about Tommy, about the 8-year-old boy who'd hidden in a closet while his foster mother died. I think we go. I think we stand before the whole state and show them what's possible. And I think we keep going, keep building, keep changing, keep proving that redemption isn't just a word. She held up the patch Wolf had given her, the skull and wings, the Iron Cross. This is who we are now. Let's show the world. Wolf nodded. Then we go. The cottage door opened again. Emma ran in pigtails, bouncing drawing clutched in her hand. Mrs. Caldwell, Mrs. Caldwell, I finished it, the picture I promised. She thrust the paper into Maggie's hands. It was crude, a child's artwork, but it showed a woman in a blue dress surrounded by men on motorcycles. They were all wearing capes, and at the center in bright gold letters, Amau had written, My Heroes. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. It's perfect, sweetheart. You like it? I love it. Wolf knelt down beside the little girl. Hey, Emma, what do you want to be when you grow up? A teacher, like Mr. Poet, so I can help people learn things. That's a good dream. What do you want to be? Wolf looked at Maggie, at Crusher, at Poet. I think I already am what I want to be. What's that? He smiled. Someone worth looking up to. 5 years had passed since the frozen morning that changed everything. Maggie Caldwell stood at the window of her cottage watching the sun rise over Ridgecrest. She was 81 now. Her hair had gone completely white. Her hands trembled slightly when she poured her morning coffee. But her eyes were the same sharp knowing, full of the fire that had sustained her through 8 decades of living. The cottage had changed, not in ways a stranger would notice, but in ways that mattered. The walls were covered with photographs, now Maggie with Wolf at the governor's mansion, Crusher reading to children at the elementary school, Poet teaching a literature class at Ridgecrest High. Emma's drawings had multiplied until they filled an entire wall, documenting 5 years of friendship in crayon and colored pencil. And on the mantel beside Walter's Iron Cross sat something new. A framed newspaper clipping from the Montana Tribune dated 3 years ago. The headline read, Hells Angels chapter receives National Award for Community Service. The phone rang. Mrs. Caldwell, it's Mayor Whitmore. David, it's 6 in the morning. I know, I'm sorry, but the community center dedication is today, and I wanted to make sure you are still planning to speak. I told you I would. I know, but with everything that's happening, the national media, the governor coming back, all the attention, I wanted to give you one last chance to back out. Nobody would blame you if... David, yes? Stop fussing. I've been giving speeches since before you were born. I'll be there. She hung up. Outside, the sound of motorcycles drifted up from the valley. Not threatening anymore. Never threatening. Just the sound of morning patrols. Hells Angels riders checking on elderly residents, delivering groceries, making sure everyone in Ridgecrest started their day safely. The Ridgecrest model, they called it now. Other towns had adopted it. Other chapters had transformed. What started with 2 frozen men on a mountain road had become a movement that stretched across 12 states. And today they were dedicating a building to it, the Margaret Caldwell Community Center. She hadn't wanted them to name it after her. She'd fought it for months. But Wolf had been stubborn, more stubborn than she was, which was saying something. You started this, he'd told her. You deserve to be remembered. I don't want to be remembered. I want to be useful. Then be both. She'd lost that argument. Now she had to give a speech in front of hundreds of people with national cameras rolling and the governor watching and somehow find words for something that still felt like a miracle. The door opened. Morning, Mrs. Caldwell. Jack Brennan Crusher, though fewer people called him that, now walked in carrying a tray of food. He'd put on weight in the past 5 years. Good weight. Healthy weight. The gaunt, hollow look of a man who'd been running from himself his whole life had been replaced by something calmer. You don't have to bring me breakfast every day, Maggie said. I know. I want to. He set down the tray. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit, coffee exactly the way she liked it. You're going to spoil me. That's the plan. He sat down across from her. His hands, the same hands that had once wrapped around her throat, now held a book. A real book. Not a primer. A novel. "What are you reading? To Kill a Mockingbird? Poet says it's essential. Says I can't consider myself educated until I've read it 3 times. How many times is this? 4. Maggie smiled. Overachiever. I've got a lot of time to make up for. They ate in comfortable silence. 5 years had built this a routine, a rhythm, a relationship that neither of them had expected, but both had come to need. Jack had gotten his GED 2 years ago, then his EMT certification. Now he led the Hells Angels emergency response team, partnering with local fire departments across Montana to provide first response in rural areas where professional services were stretched thin. Last year alone, his team had responded to 47 emergencies, 12 lives saved directly, countless more touched by the simple fact that someone cared enough to show up. "You nervous about today?" Jack asked. "Should I boy? Lot of people coming, lot of cameras, lot of expectations. I've faced worse at them." "I know, but still." Maggie set down her fork. "Jack, do you remember what I told you that first night after Wolf called? You told me a lot of things that first night. I told you that who you are isn't what you've done, it's what you do next." "I remember." "Well, today is what you did next, all of you. This building, this town, this movement. That's your legacy, not mine. I just opened a door. You walked through it." Jack's eyes glistened. "You did more than open a door. You believed in us when nobody else would, when we didn't even believe in ourselves. That's what teachers do. You're not a teacher. You're a miracle." Maggie laughed. "I'm a stubborn old woman who didn't know when to quit. Nothing miraculous about that." Agree to disagree. The morning passed quickly. By 10 o'clock, the cottage was full. Wolf arrived first, looking more like a businessman than a biker in his pressed shirt and clean jacket. He still wore his patch. They all did, but it had changed. The iron cross at the center had become the symbol of the new Hells Angels, a reminder of what they'd chosen to become. Poet came next. His leg had healed years ago, though he still walked with a slight limp. He had earned his teaching certificate 4 years back and now taught English and creative writing at Ridgecrest High. His students adored him. His memoir, Road to Redemption, had been on the Montana bestseller list for 18 months. "Nervous?" he asked Maggie. "Everyone keeps asking me that." "No, I'm not nervous. I'm 81 years old. What's the worst that can happen?" "You could trip on stage. Then you'll catch me." "Deal." Rico and Hammer arrived together. They'd stayed in Ridgecrest after that first week and never left. Rico ran a motorcycle repair shop that employed 6 locals. Hammer had become a volunteer firefighter and was currently dating the fire chief's daughter. The world was strange sometimes, beautiful and strange. "You ready to go, Mrs. C?" Rico asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." They drove into town in Wolf's truck, the same truck that had carried Maggie home from Miller's Pass 5 years ago. The streets were lined with people. Banners hung from every lamppost. The high school band was already playing. "This is insane," Jack muttered. "This is what you built," Maggie replied. "Own it." The community center stood at the heart of Ridgecrest, brand new, gleaming. Constructed by Hells Angels, volunteers from 16 different chapters, working alongside local contractors who had once refused to shake their hands. Above the entrance, in letters 2 feet tall, the name Margaret Caldwell Community Center. Maggie looked at it for a long moment. "I still don't deserve this." Wolf took her arm. "With all due respect, ma'am, that's not your call." The ceremony began at noon. The crowd filled the main hall and spilled out onto the street. Maggie counted at least 3 news vans, local, state, national. The governor sat in the front row beside Mayor Whitmore and Sheriff Dawkins. Pastor Holloway was there along with nearly every resident of Ridgecrest and the Hells Angels. 43 of them from 12 different chapters standing in formation along the walls. Their jackets bore the same patched skull and wings iron cross at the center, the symbol of a transformation that had seemed impossible 5 years ago. Wolf spoke first. "5 years ago, I rode into this town expecting a fight. I came to collect my brothers and remind everyone why they should fear us. Instead, I found something I never expected." He looked at Maggie. "I found a woman who refused to be afraid, who looked past our leather and our patches and our reputation and saw human beings, who saved two of my brothers when she had every reason to let them die. His voice grew stronger. That woman changed everything. She didn't just save Tank and Poet. She saved all of us. She showed us that we could be more than what the world expected, that we could protect instead of threaten, serve instead of take, build instead of destroy. He gestured to the building around them. This center is a symbol of that change. Every board was hammered by hands that once held weapons. Every nail was driven by men who once thought violence was the only language they knew. We built this with our own sweat, our own labor, our own redemption. He turned to face the crowd, and we named it after the woman who taught us how. Applause erupted. Maggie felt hands on her shoulders guiding her toward the stage. She climbed the steps slowly, her knees weren't what they used to be, and faced the microphone. The crowd fell silent. "I don't like attention," she began. "Ask anyone. I've spent my whole life trying to avoid being the center of anything. I'm a nurse. Nurses work behind the scenes. We fix what's broken and move on." She paused. "But 5 years ago, something broke that I couldn't fix with bandages or sutures. Two men lay dying on a mountain road, and all I could do was drag them to safety and pray." Her eyes found Jack in the crowd. "I didn't know their names. I didn't know their stories. I didn't know that one of them had spent his childhood hiding in closets waiting for someone to protect him. I didn't know that the other had lost a daughter and spent years trying to outrun his grief." Her eyes found Poet. "All I knew was that they were human beings who needed help. And that's enough. That should always be enough." She looked out at the Hells Angels lining the walls. These men have been called criminals, outlaws, threats to public safety, and some of that was earned. Some of them have done things they're not proud of, things that hurt people, things that left scars. Her voice grew fiercer, but that's not who they are. That's who they were, and there's a difference that matters more than anything else in this world. She held up Walter's iron cross. "My husband made this the week before he died. He was a blacksmith. He spent 50 years turning raw metal into something beautiful. He used to say that fire doesn't destroy, it reveals. It burns away the impurities and shows what was always there." She looked at Wolf. "I've watched these men go through fire, real fire, the fire of facing who they were and choosing to become something different. And I've seen what the fire revealed." She smiled. "Heroes, every single one of them. Heroes who protect the weak, heroes who stand up when others won't, heroes who prove every day that redemption isn't just possible, it's happening. Right here, right now, in this town, in this building, in these hearts." The crowd was on its feet. Governor Patricia Wilson approached the stage, a medal in her hands. "Margaret Caldwell, on behalf of the state of Montana, I present you with the Governor's Medal for Distinguished Community Service. Your compassion has transformed not just one town, but an entire movement. Your courage has shown us all that the greatest strength lies not in violence, but in the willingness to see the humanity in everyone." She placed the medal around Maggie's neck. "Thank you for changing the world." The ceremony continued for another hour. Person after person came to the microphone to share their stories. Parents whose children had been saved on Miller's Pass. Elderly residents who received daily check-ins from Hells Angels volunteers. Business owners who had partnered with the club on community projects. And then it was Emma's turn. She was 17 now, no longer the little girl with pigtails who had called the bikers heroes. She'd grown into a young woman with her father's stubborn jaw and her mother's kind eyes. And she walked to the microphone with the poise of someone who had been raised in the presence of extraordinary people. "When I was 7 years old," she began, "I got stuck on a bus on Miller's Pass. I was scared, more scared than I'd ever been in my life. And then these men came out of nowhere, men on motorcycles, men with leather jackets, men who looked like the villains in every movie I'd ever seen." She looked at Wolf. "But they weren't villains. They were the first real heroes I'd ever met. They carried me through the snow. They wrapped me in blankets. They told me I was brave." Her voice cracked. "I'm going to college next year. I'm going to study education. And the only reason I'm able to do that is because of what happened that day. Because a woman I'd never met climbed into a broken bus and told me to trust the scary men. Because those scary men turned out to be the best people I've ever known." She looked at Maggie. Mrs. Caldwell, you saved my life. You saved all our lives, and I want you to know something. What, sweetheart? I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to look at people everyone else is afraid of and see who they really are. I want to open doors that other people keep locked. I want to change the world one person at a time. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. Then do it. That's all any of us can do. One person at a time. Ma ran off the stage and threw her arms around Maggie. The cameras flashed. The crowd cheered. And in that moment, everything Maggie had built felt complete. But the day wasn't over. After the ceremony, Wolf pulled her aside. I need to tell you something. What? The club voted last night, unanimous. Every chapter that's adopted the Ridgecrest model, every member who's made the change, voted on what? On you. Maggie frowned. I don't understand. Wolf reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a patch, but not like the others. This one was different, an iron cross on a field of gold with words stitched around the border. What is this? Read it. She held it up to the light. Mother of the movement. William what? We voted to make you an honorary member, the first in our history, the first person outside the club to wear our colors. Maggie stared at the patch. I can't accept this. Why not? Because I'm not. I haven't. You've done more for us than anyone, ever. You looked at men the world had given up on and saw something worth saving. You taught us that strength could heal as well as harm. You built a movement that's transforming thousands of lives across the country. He took the patch from her trembling hands and pinned it to her sweater. You're one of us now, Mrs. Caldwell. Whether you like it or not. Maggie looked down at the patch, at the iron cross that connected her to Walter, to Wolf, to everything that had happened in the past 5 years. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep teaching us. Say you'll keep believing in us. Say you'll be there when we fall down. She looked up at him. I'll always be there until the day I die, and probably after that knowing me. Wolf laughed. That's my girl. The celebration lasted until sunset, but as the crowds thinned and the cameras packed up and the out-of-town chapters began their rides home, Maggie found herself drawn to a quiet corner of the community center, a memorial wall. It held photographs of everyone who had made the transformation possible. Sheriff Dawkins, Mayor Whitmore, Pastor Holloway, Emma and her father, Sarah Mitchell, the bus driver who had become a Hells Angels advocate, Patricia Hayes, the music teacher who had recovered from her concussion and now led a community choir. And at the center, in a place of honor, 2 photographs that made Maggie's heart ache. Tommy, her son, smiling in his army uniform, young and alive and full of promise. Walter, her husband, standing in his forged iron cross in his hands, looking at the camera with the quiet pride of a man who had built something that would last. I wish you could see this, she whispered. Both of you, I wish you could see what we built. They can. Maggie turned. Wolf stood behind her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. They're watching. I believe that. I have to believe that. I didn't know you believed in anything beyond the club. I didn't, not before you. He moved to stand beside her, looking at the photographs. But you taught me that there's more to this world than what we can see. That people don't really disappear when they die. They just change form, become part of something bigger. That sounds almost spiritual. Maybe it is. Maybe you turned an atheist biker into a believer. Maggie laughed. Walter would have loved that. He was always trying to get me to take people to church. Did it work? Never. I told him that God and I had an understanding. He does his job, I do mine, and we meet in the middle when someone needs saving. Wolf smiled. That sounds about right. They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the memorial with going. I need to ask you something, Wolf said finally. What? It's about the future, about what happens when... He stopped, started again. You're 81 years old, Mrs. Caldwell. I'm aware. And the movement depends on you. Every chapter looks to you for guidance. Every new member learns about you as part of their orientation. You're the heart of everything we've built. I'm not going to live forever, William. I know. That's what scares me. Maggie turned to face him. Let me tell you something. When Walter died, I thought it was over. I thought everything we'd built together would disappear. Our routines, our traditions, our love. I thought without him, there was nothing left. But there was. There was me and everything he'd taught me and everything we'd created together. He didn't disappear when he died. He became part of me, and I became part of something bigger than either of us. She placed her hand on Wolf's arm. That's what will happen when I'm gone. I won't disappear. I'll become part of you, part of Jack, part of Marcus, part of every person in this room and every chapter that carries our symbol. The movement won't end with me. It'll grow, it'll change, it'll become something I can't even imagine. You really believe that? I know it, because that's what legacy means. It's not about buildings or awards or patches. It's about the people you touch, the lives you change, the doors you open that stay open long after you're gone. Wolf's eyes glistened. I never had a mother, not really. The woman who gave birth to me left when I was 6. The foster mothers after that were just placeholders. People who were paid to keep me alive until someone else's turn. He met her eyes. But you're what a mother should be, what I always imagined one would be. Patient, fierce, willing to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. William, let me finish. I've never said this to anyone, never even thought it really, but I need you to know. He took her hands. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Ba. The best thing that ever happened to any of us. And whatever time we have left, whether it's years or months or days, I'm going to spend it making sure you know how much you matter. Maggie squeezed his hands. I already know. I've known since the day you walked into my cottage and let me serve you coffee in Walter's mug. You're not the man you were, William. You're the man you were always meant to be, and I am so proud of you. Thank you for everything. Thank yourself. I just opened the door. You did the rest. The evening faded into night. One by one, the remaining visitors said their goodbyes. Jack helped Maggie into the truck. Poet promised to visit tomorrow with a new book he wanted her to read. Rico and Hammer waved as they rode off into the darkness. And Wolf drove Maggie back to her cottage on the mountain. Same time tomorrow, he asked as she climbed out. Same time every day, until I can't anymore. I'll hold you to that. She watched him drive away. Then she walked inside, hung her coat by the door, and crossed to the window where Walter's iron cross still caught the light. We did it, my love, she whispered. We really did it. She touched the glass. The cold seeped into her fingers. But she didn't mind. Tomorrow she would walk her mountain road as she had for 30 years. Tomorrow Jack would come for breakfast, and they would continue his education. Tomorrow Wolf would call with news from another chapter, another transformation, another life changed. But tonight she was tired. Good tired. Full tired. The kind of tired that came from a life well lived. She sat down in Walter's dog chair and closed her eyes. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was the patch on her sweater, the iron cross, the words, Mother of the Movement. She smiled. 1 year later, Maggie Caldwell died in her sleep on a Tuesday morning in March. She was 82 years old. She had lived through wars and losses and joys and sorrows. She had saved more lives than anyone could count. And in her final years, she had sparked a transformation that would echo through generations. The funeral filled the community center that bore her name. Hell's Angels came from every corner of the country, 412 riders from 37 chapters, all wearing the iron cross she had inspired. They stood in perfect formation outside the building, their engines silent, their heads bowed. Wolf gave the eulogy. Margaret Caldwell was not a Hell's Angel, he said. She was something better. She was the person who reminded us what we could be, who looked at men everyone else had written off and saw heroes waiting to emerge, who taught us that the fire doesn't destroy, it reveals. His voice broke. She called us her sons, all of us, every man who ever wore this patch and chose to use it for good. And we called her something too, even if we never said it out loud. He looked at the coffin draped in the club's colors. We called her Mom. Jack spoke next. 5 years ago, I couldn't read. I couldn't write. I couldn't imagine a future that was anything other than violence and loss. Then a 76-year-old woman dragged me through the snow and told me I was worth saving. He held up a book, To Kill a Mockingbird, the same copy he'd been reading the morning of the community center dedication. She taught me to read. She taught me that strength was about protecting people, not hurting them. She taught me that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. He pressed the book to his chest. I'm going to keep reading Mrs. Caldwell every day until I've read every book you ever recommended. And then I'm going to start over and read them all again. Poet was last. I was a teacher once, he said. Then I lost everything and forgot how to teach, forgot how to hope, forgot how to live. He looked at the gathered crowd. Maggie Caldwell gave me back my classroom, gave me back my purpose, gave me back my life. Every student I teach, every book I share, every life I touch, that's her legacy. That's what she built. He took a breath. The woman I love is pregnant, our first child, and we're going to name her Margaret, so that every time I call my daughter's name, I'll remember the woman who made it all possible. The service ended with Amazing Grace sung by the community choir that Patricia Hayes had built. And then the Hells Angels rode, 412 motorcycles' engines roaring, following the hearse up the mountain road to the cemetery where Walter and Tommy were already waiting. They buried Margaret Caldwell beside her husband under a headstone that bore the iron cross she had made famous. The inscription read, "She opened doors, she changed hearts, she saved us all." Wolf was the last to leave. He stood at the grave as the sun set, his hand resting on the cold stone. "I'll take care of them," he said, "all of them. The club, the movement, everything you built. I'll protect it with my life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a patch. The original one he'd given her 5 years ago, worn soft with handling. He placed it on the grave. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." He walked back to his motorcycle, started the engine, looked back one last time. "Rest now, you've earned it." Then he rode down the mountain toward Ridgecrest, toward the movement that would carry Margaret Caldwell's name for generations to come. And the world kept turning. Jack became the director of the Hells Angels Emergency Response Program, training teams across the country. Poet's daughter, little Margaret, was born 7 months later with her mother's eyes and her namesake's stubborn spirit. Emma graduated from college with honors and returned to Ridgecrest to teach at the elementary school. The community center hosted thousands of events, weddings and funeral celebrations, and memorials, moments of joy and moments of grief. And every morning at dawn, a Hells Angels rider walked the mountain road that Maggie had walked for 30 years. Different riders on different days, but always someone. Because some things were too important to let go. Because some legacies demanded to be remembered. Because one woman had looked at the broken and the lost and the forgotten and seen what no one else could see. The capacity for good, the possibility of redemption, the truth that lives in every human heart waiting for someone brave enough to find it. Margaret Caldwell found it, and she taught the world to find it too. The iron cross still hangs in the window of the cottage on the ridge. The patch still rests on her grave. The name still graces the building at the heart of Ridgecrest, and the movement she started still grows. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one act of compassion at a time. That is her legacy. That is her gift. That is the truth she proved with every breath she took. That redemption is not just possible, it is inevitable for those brave enough to reach for it.